We're back with Florida speeches covering the designation ceremony of Senator Joe Negron as the next president of the Florida Senate. After receiving the vote of the Republican caucus, which has a significant majority in the Florida Senate, Senator Negron continued his remarks to his colleagues. He has made addressing pollution problems of Lake Okeechobee a top priority.
In the summer of 2013, there was near historic levels of rainfall in South Florida, and Lake Okeechobee rose to levels where the Army Corps of Engineers made the decision to have massive releases east and west in order to protect the integrity of the dike. And in the community that I represent, 136 billion gallons of water was sent from Lake Okeechobee into the St. Lucie River and the Indian River Lagoon. It also had an adverse effect on Southwest Florida, with water going out the Caloosahatchee to the Fort Myers area. And our community came together, and this Senate stepped up. And President Gates appointed a select committee. We met in Stewart, and I promised people measurable progress in reasonable time. The then Speaker of the House, Speaker Weatherford, also came to our community to visit. We had a group called the River Kids, who were young people who came together to support our efforts. There was some excellent reporting by the Stewart News on this issue that led to not only local coverage, but also state coverage and national coverage. It was very effective in bringing the attention of the state to our issue. We funded $231 million in projects. These were not studies. They were not groups getting around to talk about what to do. These are tangible things. Thanks to Governor Scott's support, we're bridging 2.5 miles of the Tamiami Trail so that water can flow south from Everglades National Park into Florida Bay, and that's going to be a huge step in the right direction. We just broke ground on the C-44 reservoir, which will store basin runoff and also assist us in not having water go into the lake. My goal is, before I finish my term in the Senate and pack up boxes, put them in the Jeep, and head back to Stewart, I have a personal mission, and that is to work with the agricultural community, to work with Florida's best scientists, to work with all of us as a legislature who have background and knowledge on this issue, that we will permanently protect our estuaries, protect our lagoons, come up with a way to not have these terrible discharges from Lake Okeechobee that destroy our environment. That's one of my goals. Thank you very much. Thank you, Governor. This isn't just a South Florida or a Treasure Coast issue. If you take a map of Florida and you draw a line across the state of Florida at the northern boundary of Lake Okeechobee, 8 million of the 20 million people who live in Florida live below that line. So it affects most of the state. In addition, as President Gardner knows, we're inextricably linked with the Orange County and the Orlando and the Central Florida area through the Kissimmee River. And I appreciate everything that the Central Florida community has done, and also the area that has springs, to take steps that have been done this session, and I know will continue under Speaker Crisafulli and President Gardner this session, to make sure that we have a water policy that protects our environment.
Senate President-Designate Joe Negron told a personal story to make his point about not criminalizing adolescents.
When I was 13 or 14 years old, my brothers and I, two of them, had come up with a really ingenious way to pass some time on a lazy summer afternoon in West Palm Beach, Florida. We made a dozen water balloons. We put them in a box. We secreted ourselves behind a cabbage palm tree, and then we were going to lob these water balloons in the general direction of cars that would occasionally pass by Military Trail where we lived. And this was very entertaining. For those of you who've played softball with me, you'll know that usually we missed. But on one of the times, I nailed a car right on the side door panel, and we were exuberant, thought this was great, until the car stopped in the middle of the road, backed up, and a very tall, frightening-looking gentleman got out. He walked straight up, looked me in the eye, and flipped down his badge and said, "Son, you hit the wrong car." And he marched us up to my father, told him what happened, and suffice it to say, that never happened again. Grand opening, grand closing. Now, take that same factual circumstance and fact pattern and transfer it to today. It's a virtual certainty that we would have been arrested. We would have been charged with throwing a deadly missile at a conveyance, which I'm sure the legislature has turned into a second-degree felony with enhanced penalties. We would have been thrown into the juvenile justice system. Our family would have been declared dysfunctional. The other 4 Negron children, the younger siblings, would have been declared to be at additional risk due to their miscreant brothers, and they would have been signed up for all sorts of wraparound services. I would still be explaining this on my Florida bar application, trying to get a license to practice law from the Board of Bar Examiners. There's a delicate balance here. We should not and we will not tolerate serious wrongdoing by young people, but at the same time, let's not criminalize adolescents.
Senator Negron next outlined a governing goal he would follow.
Let's embrace the Constitution. The majority of men and women, thank you. The majority of men and women who have ever lived have lived under tyranny. And there have been all kinds of rationales to explain this, from divine right of kings to power of the sword to group superiority. But that's the way things were for the vast majority of people who've ever lived. Then the Enlightenment comes to Europe. People like Rousseau and John Locke came up with what was really a subversive, radical idea, which was that in order for a government to be legitimate, it needed to have the consent of the governed. And John Locke called this the social contract. And those ideas came across and were exported across the Atlantic to Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, James Madison, who wrote the Bill of Rights. And these rights are extravagant: freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to a trial by jury, the right to confront witnesses against you, the right to due process. They had a profound idea that these rights were not a bequest from the government to us, but rather they were an endowment from our Creator. And the government didn't give us the rights, and the government can't take them away. And so with those rights and with those constitutional limitations, we legislate in boundaries. And let me mention 2 points that are related to this. There are some people in the process who view our constituents as feeble and faltering, in need of our constant supervision, our advice, our guidance. I do not see our constituents that way. I think they are strong. I think they're resilient. I believe in the supremacy of the individual. Secondly, there's a temptation, and by the way, it affects me as well, it's with all of us, that we lose some of our skepticism and wariness about government, because now we are part of the government. And we all probably need to be reminded of the admonition from the Apostle Paul in Romans that a man should not think of himself more highly than he ought. We don't have all the answers. We're not overseeing anybody. Any power we have is 100% derivative from the people that we serve. And it's important to always remember that the people are in charge, we're here to serve, and the citizens remain sovereign. I want to conclude today by sharing with you a gift that my father gave to me when I was about 12 years old. He introduced me to the life and writings of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a theologian, a professor, a pastor in Germany during the rise of Hitler in the Third Reich. He actually was able to come to the United States as part of a university fellowship. Could have stayed in the United States safely during the war, but he was outraged at the initial mistreatment and later genocide of the Jewish citizens of Germany. So he went back to Germany where he had a following and where people would listen to what he said and they would read what he wrote. And he spoke out against the mistreatment of others. He ultimately became involved in a plot to overthrow Hitler. He was arrested. He was charged with treason. And from cell number 92 at the Tegel prison, he wrote these words. Who am I? They often tell me I step from my cell's confinement calmly, cheerfully, firmly, like a squire from his country house. Who am I? They often tell me I used to speak to my warders freely, friendly, and clearly as though it were mine to command. Who am I? They also tell me I bore the days of misfortune equably, smilingly, proudly, like one accustomed to win. Am I really then that which other men tell of? Or am I only what I myself know of myself? Restless and longing and sick, like a bird in a cage, struggling for breath as though hands were compressing my throat, yearning for flowers, for colors, for the voices of birds, thirsting for neighborliness, for words of kindness, tossing in expectations of great events, powerlessly trembling for friends at an infinite distance, weary and faint and ready to say farewell to it all. Who am I? Am I one or the other? Am I both at once? Before others a hypocrite, and before myself a contemptible, woebegone weakling? Or is something within me still like a beaten army fleeing in disorder from victory already achieved? Who am I? They haunt me, these lonely questions of mine. Whoever I am, thou knowest, O God, I am thine. May his extraordinary life of courage inspire us as we represent the people of Florida in this place. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.